Welcome to my channel. My name is Benoit Sherry. Today, I will be honoring the Emperor Haile Selassie I the First. Africa is the world's largest fertile continent at about 30.3 million kilometers, 11.7 million square miles, including adjacent islands. Africa, Mother Africa, the continent covers 6% of the Earth's surface and 20% of its land area, with 1.3 billion people, and account for about 6% of the world's population. Eastern Africa is widely accepted as a place of original man, original human beings. Ethiopia is a landlocked country located in the horns of Africa. It shares borders with Eritrea to the north, Djibouti to the northeast, Somalia to the east, Kenya to the south, South Sudan to the west, and Sudan to the northwest, with over 109 million inhabitants. Some of the oldest skeleton evidence was found in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is known to be where modern humans first walked. The capital of Ethiopia is Addis Ababa. Ethiopian government is a monarchy. The monarchy was founded by the Solomonic dynasty of the Queen of Sheba under the first king Menelik. The Kebra Naglas, the Glory of Kings, is an ancient book, 700-year-old. The Kebra Naglas has fascinated scholars since the modern era that traces the origin of the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia to the Queen of Sheba. The Kebra Naglas was composed to legitimize the Solomonic dynasty, which ruled the Ethiopian Empire. Following its establishment in 1270, it narrates how the real Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I. Menelik I was the first emperor of Ethiopia and the son of the biblical king Solomon and the Ethiopian queen of Sheba, followed by Menelik II, also emperor of Ethiopia, was remembered for leading Ethiopian troops in the Battle of Adwa. As we go down the bloodline, the father, Ras Makonnen, the grandson of Haile Selassie, who was the aunt of Menelik II, who also played a very important part in the Battle of Adwa. And then, finally, Haile Selassie I was born on July 23rd, 1892. He was the Crown Prince and Regent of the Ethiopian Empire from 1916 to 1925, and then the King and Regent from 1926 to 1930, and finally Emperor from 1930 to 1974. He is a defining figure in modern Ethiopian history. He was a member of the Solomonic dynasty who traced his bloodline to the European Emperor Menelik I and Menelik II. Haile Selassie's internationalist views led to Ethiopia becoming a chapter member of the United Nations at the League of Nations in 1936, he condemned Italy's use of chemical weapons against its people during the Second Italian-Ethiopian War. Mussolini invaded Ethiopia and promptly declared his own Italian empire after the League of Nations afforded the Emperor Haile Selassie the opportunity to address the assembly. Italy withdrew its League delegation on the 12th of May of 1936. It was in this context that the Emperor Haile Selassie walked into the hall of the League of Nations, introduced by the President of the Assembly as His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor of Ethiopia. Haile Selassie waited calmly for the hall to be cleared and responded majestically with a speech considered by some to be among the most stirring of the 20th century. The speech made the emperor an icon for anti-fascists around the world, and Time magazine named him Man of the Year. He failed, however, to get what he most needed. The League agreed to only partial and sanctions on Italy. Only 6 nations in 1937 did not recognize Italy's occupation: China, New Zealand, the Soviet Union, the Republic of Spain, and Mexico, and the United States. It is then often said that the League of Nations effectively collapsed due to its failure to condemn Italy's invasion of Abyssinia. Another address to the United Nations, a famous speech by the Emperor Haile Selassie in October of 1963. Last May in Addis Ababa, I convened a meeting of heads of African states and governments. In 3 days, the 32 nations represented at the conference demonstrated to the world that when the will and the determination exist, nations and peoples of diverse backgrounds can and will work together in unity to the achievement of the common goals and the assurance of that equality and brotherhood which we desire. On the question of racial discrimination, the Addis Ababa Conference taught to those who will learn this further lesson that until the philosophy which holds one race superior and the other inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, that until there are no longer first class and second class citizens of any nations, that until the color of a man's skin is of no significance than the color of his eyes, that the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, that until that day, the dream of lasting peace and world citizenship and the rule of international morality will remain but a fleeting illusion to be persuaded but never attained, and until the ignoble and unhappy regimes that hold our brothers in Angola and Mozambique and in South Africa and subhuman bondage have been toppled and destroyed, until bigotry and prejudice and malicious and inhumane self-interest have been replaced by understanding and tolerance and goodwill, until all Africans stand and speak as free beings, equal in the eyes of all men, as they are in the eyes of heaven. Until that day, Africa continent will not know peace. We Africans will fight if necessary, and we know that we shall win, as we are confident in the victory of good over evil. We must look first to Almighty God, who has raised man above the animals and endured him with intelligence and reason. We must put our faith in him, that he will not desert us or permit us to destroy humanity, which he created in his image. And we must look into ourselves, into the depth of our souls. We must become something we have never been, and for which our education and experience and environment have ill prepared us. We must become bigger than we have been, more courageous, greater in spirit, larger in outlook. We must become members of a new race, overcoming petty prejudice, owning our ultimate allegiance not to nations but to our fellow man within the human community.